The man who has written the history of Somalia is Professor I.M. Lewis.
Well, modern Somali nationalism really got going immediately after the Second World War, when the whole area, the whole of the Horn of Africa virtually, was under British military administration. The Somalis as a people have consistently sought to form a state based on the principle of self-determination applied to them, i.e. on the principle of, in effect, Somali self-determination. And, of course, while the British were administering the area, the British Foreign Secretary of the day, Ernest Bevin, in 1946, launched his famous plan to create a state on the basis of Somali nationhood, and that this should be probably a United Nations Trust territory administered by Britain. The proposals were opposed by America, which was being lobbied strongly by Ethiopia, and which had interests in establishing military facilities, American military facilities, in Ethiopia. Once the Ethiopian area, what is ethnically Western Somalia, was finally surrendered to the Ethiopians by the British, this created a very lively nationalist movement in the British Somaliland Protectorate. And these two movements, the one in the north and the one in the south associated with the Somali Youth League, got together and sought to form a unitary state at independence in 1960, which of course is what happened.
The then pro-West civilian government of Somalia, did it try to obtain arms from the West?
Yes, it did, and it was offered a military aid package, but of course it was offered this in a situation which wasn't very favorable, because it was offered a much bigger Russian package, and since the civilian government, the civilian Somali government, was aware, all too aware, that the Western powers were in general supporting Ethiopia and also opposing Somali nationalist interests and aspirations in northern Kenya, the much larger Russian package was a much more attractive offer, which they accepted.
Consider the Somali position realistic in turning to the United States and the West for military aid after many years of a very close relationship to the Soviet Union?
Well, I think they might have got a better response if they had kept better relations with the West while still having this very close relationship with the Soviet Union. But since they hadn't done that, they could hardly really expect the West simply to replace the Soviet Union at the same level of military supplies in a situation where the West risked becoming sucked into an extremely unpopular war and risked being accused of supporting a local power which was widely regarded, misregarded and misrepresented as being expansionist, because of this persisting misunderstanding about the nature of the Somali independence struggle in eastern Ethiopia. What I think surprised the Americans was the level and intensity of the Russian response to the Ethiopian problem and the extent to which Russia has manifestly been willing to become militarily involved as the superpower protecting Ethiopia and solving its internal problems, but not, I think, solving them completely. Because it seems to me that it's not in the Russian interest that there should be complete peace and tranquility inside Ethiopia or between Ethiopia and her neighbors. For if that were the case, obviously the Russians would be redundant, and the Ethiopians would simply do what they've done in the past. They would ask them to leave and get rid of that superpower because they didn't need them any longer, which would enable the Americans, who still, I think, are interested for a variety of reasons, economic as well as political, in now perhaps eventually returning to Ethiopia, which would enable the Americans to return.